Shalom and welcome back. Um, you know, there's a lot that's been going on, obviously, in the world, and it's tough watching it. I have to say, I think one of the hardest things for me um, is seeing the people that are foolish and mocking, making jokes out of um, the whole issue that's been going on, and there's a lot of things that we see just in our area and stuff, and how people are um, being responding and stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've seen in your areas and stuff where it's like everybody's trying to buy all the toilet tissue they can find and cleaners and stuff. And, it's huge because I could tell you one of the things that's really gotten my, attention and stuff is just, wow, I've never seen this in my life. There's never been such an event as drastic as this where you literally see people um, being affected by it so badly, affected by something of this extent so badly. And, I think of the people in China. I think of the people in Iran. I think of the people in Italy. And, Italy, for example, they've been hit so hard. They just say the numbers keep rising over and over again. And, you know, how do we look at these things? They're plagues, right? They're obviously the things that the Torah speaks about of it's really what the enemy is trying to do. The enemy wants to try to see mankind suffer and fall into traps of being punished, and to want to bring punishments and try to bring afflictions on people because of sin, and how the world is affected, and how, I mean, think about it. When you get sick or something happens and stuff in your own personal life, the enemy's trying to bring anything of what he wants to make you suffer and go through hardships. And it's when we look at these things, we begin to realize and stuff, these are the things that really begin to shake us as people. I really grieve. I grieve for all the people in Italy that are suffering to such extents, that are going through such harsh moments right now, and how they're having to fight so crazy over trying to help people, and man, I can't tell you. I spend my nights at times just either I wake up at night or I'm just laying there in bed, and I just start praying over all the stuff that's been going on in the world. Praying for God's mercy, praying for God to restore and to heal and to protect and help people and to take away these plagues. And it's really rough seeing it. It really is. I mean, it's. I remember one time when I was in Ofakim, and I had pneumonia, and oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how horrible that was. That was by far the worst physical ailment I'd ever suffered in my life. You felt like you were drowning. You felt like you couldn't breathe. You couldn't get the oxygen and air. I look at these things and my heart goes out to people who are suffering with this. And all I can think about is how we need to pray. We need to do teshuvah. We need to work on our personal relationship with God. We need to work on our obeying God and doing what God says. We need to work on our families. We need to work on our homes, our relationships. We need to work on every aspect of our life. And, you know, it's horrible. It's horrible, the things that are happening. And I think if you're out there, you should be taking your life serious. And you should be taking the issues that you see serious. You know, it's sad when you hear about the main people that have been gravely affected by it. Elderly people, people with low immune systems, the weak and feeble in many ways. And, you know, it's just, we have to pray for them. We do. We need to pray for our communities. We need to pray for our cities. We need to pray for our countries that we're in. And we need to pray for God's mercy, you know, because you have to understand, it's moments like this and stuff, you know, we have to really look at this and stuff. This is not what God desires or wants. This is not what God is seeking after. This is not what God is wanting to exist. The Bible makes it very clear that God has no desire that these things come about. And how it starts, how these things begin, you know, first off, we know from all the data that the coronavirus is actually, it comes from specifically the bat. It's a gene that's in the bat that a bat has, and that it was something that was ingested in regard to eating bats. This is why we know from the Torah, why the Bible gives us a plain laid out explanation of why we are not to eat all these unclean animals, because it will make us sick. It'll make us ill. It causes and spread diseases, and it makes you contaminated yourself. And because the coronavirus, the virus itself, the way it spreads is it attaches an aspect to the actual protein, and it's what causes the rest of the breakdown. You know, this is one of the big things where it's like, you know, I see this and stuff so much, especially amongst the bushcraft communities and stuff, where people aren't seeing the truth that, you know, survival food is not eating unclean animals. It's not eating rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks and pigs and all that stuff like people are being taught and told and being falsely preached at and stuff. It's staying away from these things. And, you know, to really encourage, you know, you all out there and stuff, you know, we need to pray. We need to ask God to really help us to change and help us to do teshuvah and help us to fix the things, you know. It always drives me nuts when everybody's acting like we're at war against the disease and this is it, we're fighting this battle. And no, this is not how the battle's fought. We fight this battle by doing teshuvah and returning back to God and obeying Him and staying away from the enemy and turning away from the enemy's works and putting the Torah in our heart and making it a part of our daily life and taking the scriptures serious and doing everything we can to encourage each other to do what's right. You know, this is how we fight the real battle. You know, everything we see in this world, sickness, disease, it's all spiritual. That they're all aspects of how spiritually, you know, I mean, you just, you know, think about this, you know, having glasses, all right? Like, I have to wear glasses, right? I mean, to be straightforward and honest with you, these things are all spiritual, right? They are. You know, I'd be lying to you if I was to say, oh, no, 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 this is just a physical thing, you know. They're all spiritual things and stuff, you know. How we suffer different things in our life are from different spiritual aspects and stuff of things that we've either encountered or things that had come against us and whatnot and stuff. I mean, it is, you know, and we want to do what's right, and we need to do what's right. You know, it's so important that we really look at what the Bible teaches us and we really see it for what it really says. And we put it in our heart and really let our heart bear that fruit of, you know, I need to walk in obedience. I need to keep what the Torah says. We live in a very hard time. We live in a time period where there's so much secularism in the world, and it's rampant, and it's all over the place, and it's trying to pull and draw at every single person to go in its directions, and we have to fight against it. We have to raise up our families to do what's right. We have to change directions of our sails and our ships and turn the rudder in the different directions to do what we're ought to do, which is to walk in obedience. And we should never take these things lightly. And it just grieves me. It's like, when the minute you see something like this happen and everybody just starts to freak out and stuff, because why? Because the world without the Bible is dead. There is no wisdom in it. There is no knowledge of understanding. You find people that are, I've seen this. I've seen a video where literally a lady was decking another woman in a video just over a sack of a stupid thing of tissue, right? I mean, this is how uneducated and spiritually the nations and the people are, right? I mean, guys, from a realistic standpoint, you can physically take, and this is what you should do, take an actual washcloth and wipe your butt, wash it off, and clean it and reuse it over and over again. Why fight having to deal with this tissue stuff? There are so many sanitary ways of taking care of your body and taking care of your ability to clean up after yourself that you don't need to worry about the mayhem of tissue, the mayhem of how people are treating things. And matter of fact, these are the things that you have to look at and realize that, if people aren't really educating themselves properly, the things they need to, what happens when things get worse? Seriously. Because you have to realize that the world is not going upward, guys. It is not going in the better direction. And so the question and the demand is, what are we going to do? We have to listen to the words of Scripture. We need the Bible to guide us into the way we need to follow. We need God to deliver us from the enemy. We need God to deliver us from the works of the enemy. And, the Bible tells us in the Torah that God is our healer and that He will heal us of all of the elements of Mitzrayim. And He makes it very clear. He says, which you have had. We know that when we look at each other and stuff, there is not one person in this world that cannot sit there and say they haven't had some kind of ailment at some time in their life or suffered some kind of thing, And, we need to pray. We need to pray for each other. We need to lift up one another. We need to take things serious. I can't tell you how I feel inside, because it's like it drives me crazy and makes me just go like, I can't believe how insane things are today. How the mockery spirit that exists in this world today is just unbelievable. It's like I've seen people who are 30-some years old and they mock the very thing that they should be on the opposite looking at things with a mature perspective. And they're not. And it's like, this is what's happening to society. You know, it just, I can't begin to tell you how much and how surprised I also am that the things that I'm not hearing anybody saying is pray. And let's do teshuvah. And let's pray for God to bring restoration back to the world. Bring restoration back. I don't understand this. I don't get how this is not what's being said. I don't. You think that this would be the first thing people would be looking at. And, you pray for our leaders. Pray that God would give them the wisdom. Pray for our country. Pray for God to bring a restoration, bring an elevation of righteousness and an elevation of the truth of the word so we can, as a whole, be doing teshuvah and change. And so that we can modify all the things that we've done or doing and go in the direction that we need to. And, it just, I can't, like I said, I can't begin to even express this, You see, I think people are heartless when they don't know what it's like to suffer. I think they care less about the human soul when they don't know what it's like to see things go away. When I think of losing my dad at 8 and having to watch him wither away. But I think of the time I had my tonsillectomy and how vulnerable, scared, fragile I felt when I was bleeding, literally, to death. I was scared out of my wits. I had bled so much they had to literally do an emergency surgery, put me in. I was frightened and young. I was only, I think it was 18, 19 years old at the time. I think it was 18 at the time. And, having experienced and seen other people in their vulnerable states, and I think, why are people crying out, we need to pray, and we need to ask God to help us, and we need to pray for those who are the vulnerable ones. Messiah said that that he came that none should perish, but have everlasting life. And we need to pray for the souls of people who are suffering now. That God would spare their lives, that God would give them the ability to be delivered from this, and that they can have the time, that they can have the freedom from this virus and from these elements, that they can do teshuvah, they can change, that they can seek God with their heart, that they can have their families, and that their families aren't being bereaved. I mean, I want you to think about it. The Torah gives us history upon history of what we as a nation have had to see in our own life. One of the things we see from the Torah is the fact of when the Torah teaches us about how when Israel left Egypt, I don't think realistically there was any dry eyes leaving Egypt. I think there were very humbled people leaving Egypt. And hearing the cries of Egyptians, knowing their bodies of their loved ones were dead, and that this was a plague that hit and killed the Egyptians. And I'm sure those who left were very humbled. Yes, they were glad to leave Egypt, but in this way, I think they were very humbled to know the fact that it was not just leaving. It was leaving knowing that many people died in their own sins. Many people died in Egypt because of refusing to listen to what Moshe said, refusing to hear, what was going on. And, and I think that this is why it's so important and stuff that, when we look at these things, we take it serious. We take helping and praying for each other serious. We take being a body and stop being selfish. Start looking out for each other. It's kind of interesting that, now that all this stuff has happened, people are forced to stay home. People are forced to be with their families. And if anything, you should sit there and look at this as this is a time where people are forced to really look at the reality that this is what matters, is you have not a job or things to be rushing around being occupied to, but rather a family to look at this as your obligation is to raise them up and take care of them. And doing that means keeping the Torah and teaching our kids to do what's right. Helping them to know the scriptures, helping them to know how to read and study the Torah, and hoping that they'll focus all their time and energy on it rather than being preoccupied with other things. And this is the stuff that we have to look at, we have to see and we have to really focus on. And, like I said, it's stuff, like, I'm sure when Israel left Egypt, like, all of those Jews really began to really see and stuff that life and keeping God's word is far more important than anything else in the world. It's more important than a college education. It's more important than going to some secular school out there. It's more important than anything in the world. Knowing the Torah and understanding it and obeying it is the most important thing. It's the thing that grades our daily life. It's the thing that grades our growing and getting old. It's the thing we're going to be graded for when we stand before God, is how did we live our life? How is it we were sitting here going about living our day-to-day life? Were we doing God's will, encouraging others to keep the commandments and being obedient ourselves? Are we just preoccupied with making money and going about living our life, spending and doing whatever we wanted? How is it life is being lived? These things can only be the things that we can come to understand by spending the time ourselves and looking at the Word and asking those questions that we need to ask, which they're questions that we have to ask all the time. What are we doing? Why are we here? And, I pray for those people out there. I really pray that God would just heal them and that God would remove the elements from their body and that there would be a global restoration, a global healing upon the people's lives, and that the plague be removed from them, and that there would be a grace that they would see, and that there would be an awe and understanding of in their own hearts of that grace. And I pray that people would be delivered from these things, that would be delivered from the ailments, and that those suffering would be delivered from these very ailments and sicknesses. And I pray this in Mashiach Yahushua's name. I pray for people to be healed. I pray for people to be set free from these ailments and these diseases. I pray for the wisdom of what people need to have, that those things be given to them that they need. Whatever things they lack, that those things be given. You know, you have to look at these things and sincerely see, what does this do when you see something like of this nature happening? You have to say that this is a warning in the world. This is a big, humongous warning thing that says, wake up. You know, we need to realize what really matters in life. We need to think about what is important and what really is the focal point. It's, you know, you got people that go to war and they want to wage war against countries for greed and for wealth and for their own purposeful desires and plots. Life is something that we are to look at and realize and understand and see that it's something that we're to cherish, and that we're to spend that time, you know, doing what we can to encourage others to also know their purpose and plan in life. You know, one of the things Jeremiah says, for example, he says that, you know, God's plan is not to harm us, but is to give us a hope and a future. And when we think about when he said that, he says, God's plan is not to harm us. But Jeremiah spoke this at a time period when the temple was being destroyed, when Babylon was coming in and basically taking over and wiping out areas and taking people into captivity. And we have to think about, why was Jeremiah saying this? What was it that Jeremiah was being told and given? What was he trying to help us understand? Because you see, many times people quote things out of the Bible, and they don't understand. You can't quote things out of the Bible and not forget to understand the context of what was being said when that was being said. Because a lot of times people like to quote verses to feel fluffy and duffy when they say something, you know. You know, God's plan is that he's not to harm you, but to give you hope in the future, you know. But we want to look at the context of what was said to realize, how is that really meant for us to be encouraged? Because when we look at this, like we see now, with this pandemic going all over the world, this pandemic has definitely changed people's lives forever. It's opened up minds and thoughts and ideas forever. And when we look at this, the question we should be looking at is, and this is like, for example, I'll give you just one logical, historical point of view that's happened here, okay? Like Walmart is known to be like the store that stays open forever, okay? And yet you can't find it here. It's open from 7 o'clock to 8:30. That's it. Bam, it's closed afterwards. And when we look at this, you know, from the point of view of economically speaking, people would say, oh gosh, wow, it's drastic, it's huge. But when we stop back and look at things, it's almost like we should sit there and say, what's God trying to tell us with this? What's he trying to hit at by these events happening? Don't you think maybe he's trying to tell us that life is not about things? That by having these different things shut down, by having the schools shut down, I mean, how many parents are really sitting there trying to teach their kids, period? I mean, think about it. Most parents out there don't even see their kids for the majority of the day. They might see their kids for maybe 3 to 4 hours within the whole day, and that's it. And how much of that time is a parent trying to actually involve themselves in really raising their kid. And you begin to realize, not enough, not a lot. How much of an influence do you think you're going to have for just 4 hours a day? Eat, drink, go to sleep. Bam, that's it, right? I mean, kids probably come home around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Dad probably doesn't come home till around, 7 o'clock in the evening? Maybe 8, maybe 6, all right? And then how many hours you got left in your day? Well, 7, 8, 9. Maybe your kids are in bed by 9. I mean, we're not talking a lot of time, right? The mom probably has the most of all the time if she is home. Keyword if, right? And so realistically speaking and stuff, you don't really have much time with your kids, so that you're not really investing in them as much as you really wish you did. Or at least you don't realize how much you're not investing because of how much you're not really thinking about how much you're not, because the time period that you have is not really as much as you think. Which leaves you to, if you're in America, the weekends, right? Sunday and Saturday, that's it. So you get 2 40-hour time periods to invest, while the rest of the time is spent not really investing. That tells you just how horrible things are. It is. But now that we have this whole thing, what's been forced upon everybody? Well, now everybody's home. Maybe the whole concept of how we've looked at life has been screwed up. Maybe it's because we're being shown through this thing that we haven't invested as much time with our kids as we need to. And that, I even heard a couple and stuff. It saddened me to see this on YouTube. But they were literally talking as if like, oh my gosh, I have to be home with my kids. And that right there is the big red flag that said, yeah, that's exactly why you need your kids at home. You've lost your contact with who your kids are. They're your home, right? That's that, grapevine that grows around the table, as it says in the book of Proverbs and stuff. The shoots and the clusters of grapes that your kids are supposed to be. That joyful aspect of your prodigy. But people have lost connection with that. And people have lost the understanding that family is important. And so we always see this within how God is towards us. He turns bad into good. He begins to open our eyes to see the things that we need to see, so that what was normally bad is now being used for the good, to give us a wake-up call, to be able to show us and stuff what we really need to do. How do we need to be as a society? More compassionate, more loving. I mean, if you were to live in my street and live in my neighborhood and stuff, just go down the street, a couple down blocks and stuff, and you'll see a wonderful sign that says, don't give people that are homeless food and money. Yeah, they literally say this on the signs. Don't give them money. So let's just be heartless people, and let's pretend that the homeless shelters are just taking good care of them. Does anybody really know what happens in these homeless shelters and stuff? No, of course they don't, because these people who sit there and complain and say, hey, get a job, blah, 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 to people who are actually homeless, they don't understand the fact that these shelters, that a lot of these places, you would either A, be put into a shelter where you're separated, males with males and females with females, which a lot of rape victims end up getting raped because their sons can't protect them. Some of these homeless shelters don't even allow you to lock your own physical door, so that you're in a place where everything's open to anybody. So that means any crazy woman out there that has some crazy lunatic attitude and stuff could try to harm you, that's innocent, wouldn't do anything. Or you live in these places and stuff where you can only be there for the nighttime, but you have to give them all your belongings and all your goods, which that doesn't make logical sense, so that you can be plundered, basically, right? I mean, and there's a lot of stupid things that people just don't get and understand because they're not a part of looking into the system. They're not. They're complainers of it. But yet, the compassion is lost. The Bible says that we are to be stewards and helpers of our people that live in our community. And that we need to do what we can to encourage and help. And these are the things that we find that just becomes the big point of view of like, well, what are we doing? I mean, we should be more filled with love and compassion, right? And, this is the thing that we need to look at and stuff and see the fact that there's a bigger picture that we need to look at, a bigger platform that we need to start opening ourselves to. One of the biggest things that I was very thankful for was my time when we were living in Israel and how much I love seeing how the attitude of how people treat poor people is not the same as they do in America. And very compassionate and very sensitive. And this is how we should be all the time in any country we live in any place we're at. We should always have that attitude of showing compassion and mercy and stuff, and yet this is what causes a society to dive downward, is this lack of compassion, the lack of mercy, and the lack of showing love and tenderness. God looks at us and sees, what kind of a person are you? Are you a loving, compassionate, tender, kind person? Or are you heartless and just don't care? We don't want to be heartless. We want to be people that care. Matter of fact, I remember hearing some weird comment. Somebody said, "I'm not that heartless." I'm like, well, shouldn't you not be heartless? I mean, that should be really the way we think, right? I don't want to be heartless. To say I'm not that heartless means like, okay, I'm partial, I just mind-boggled me. I just couldn't fathom, understand how somebody could say that out of their mouth. But, out of the mouth, the heart speaks, right? The abundance of the mouth is what the heart speaks and stuff. But, we need to love our neighbors ourselves. We need to be compassionate. We need to be kind. And we also need to know how to deal with things. We know how to deal with problems. We need to know how to solve them. And we need to know how to look out for each other. That's one of the most important things, is learning to look out for each other. How can God ever deny the heart when a person walks in love with his fellow man? When he walks in love and graciousness and compassion and stuff. God, he says he loves those who love him. And he says, whoever does these, the least of his brethren is done unto him. And that's why we want to love each other. We want to walk in that love and mercy. We want to be compassionate towards each other. Because, whatever we do to the least person over here, it's as if we did it to God himself. And that's why we want to be lovers of all men, and to be encouraging, and to pray, and to just lift up each other in the right way. So I just want to encourage you, out there and stuff. Take this time and just pray. And take this time to do what you can to show your love towards other people. And, and when you hear things on the news and stuff, just pray for the people. Pray for the people in the area. Take time out of your day just to sit there and just tell God, I pray for the people in China. I pray for the people that are in Iran. I pray for the people that are in Italy. I pray for the people that are in whatever country and state that it's going on, these things. And let's do teshuvah. Let's keep the Torah. It's sad. Christians don't understand. They think that, when you talk about the Torah, they're like, oh, it's just a bunch of laws, legalisms and stuff. And they don't understand that, no, it's not legalism. Legalism is when you're trying to, keep the Torah. It's specifically, you're trying to keep the Torah to earn your salvation. We're not earning our salvation, okay? We're keeping the Torah because it's our duty. We're keeping the commandments because it's what God commands us to do, because it's what he's given to us to follow and live by. And when we're saying we need to do teshuvah, we're talking about that we need to return back to the original way that we're supposed to live, to the original way that we're supposed to follow and keep, and that we need to reclaim those areas in our life back so that we're doing what's right. Because this is the way we're supposed to live. We're supposed to keep the Torah. We're supposed to encourage each other in learning Hebrew. We're supposed to encourage each other in keeping the mitzvot, and to keep the hukim and the mishpatim and the Torot. We're supposed to encourage each other in those things. And that's what our duty is supposed to be all about. And praying, just like Abraham. He prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah that it would not be destroyed. He prayed and pleaded with God, God, if possible, please. If for 50, for 45, for 30, for 20, for 10, if possible, please don't destroy the city. That's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be people who pray and who ask for God to show mercy, and that we show mercy to each other and one another. That's the way we're supposed to be. We need to be lovers of each other. Love your neighbor as yourself. Remember that. I'll see you next time.